welcome back. Ooh, sorry. Let me fix that a bit. There you go. Welcome back to my unemployment statistic hobby, that is my channel. So, welcome back. New haircut, looking fresh. Same sweater as always, but I have a new scythe campaign. Anyway, that's not what I'm going to talk about today. So first things first, I just really wanted to thank you guys for all the support and the recent subscriber growth of my channel, and I really hope to reach 200 subscribers by the time this video is posted. So, yeah, thank you guys again for all the support and all the, watching, and I hope you guys come back to my channel every now and then, and find my videos a entertaining catalog. But anyway, past that sentimental stuff. There is something I kind of wanted to talk to you about today that has been another sort of media obsession. Well, not obsession. A nagging, if I had to put it accurately, of just this piece of media that's always just been in the back of my mind, that's always really annoyed me because of its existence. That being Mufasa, the prequel to The Lion King. Now, when it comes to, what's it called? Mufasa and the Lion King, the only really real way that any of you will get what I'm trying to understand is if I establish two different things. One, my relationship with Disney, and two, Disney's inherent conservatism and its belief in the great man theory. Now, firstly, my relationship with the ever so beloved and famous and definitely not conniving corporation that is the Walt Disney Corporation. Now, my relationship with Disney isn't exactly the strongest one, if I'm going to be entirely honest. I don't exactly have a favorite film from them, and I've always kind of overlooked their works and found more inspiration from things like Hayao Miyazaki films, as an example of like kid-friendly, family-focused films. And, that's fine. Some people just have different tastes. But the thing with Disney, however, is that unlike Hayao Miyazaki, Disney is just everywhere, and yet nobody cares about it. And what I mean by that is that, Disney just has this massive corporate overreach. It's everywhere. You can never really avoid it truly, but at the same time, Disney films and Disney projects are just so not talked about nowadays. Other than, like, if you wanted to make a video saying, oh, Disney's gone woke again. Oh, they put gay people in my movie. Which, that's not what I'm going to be doing today. And if I ever start doing that, please unsubscribe from my channel. But anyway, yeah, so I think, yeah, Disney has just never been really there for me. I've never really been inspired by a Disney film, other than, like, Wall-E, but that's a Pixar project. And sure, Pixar is technically a subsidiary of Disney, but I consider Pixar very different from Disney. But I'm not going to go into the corporate relationship between that. But establishing that, instead, Disney films have never really held that high of a place for me because, well, they're Disney films, and the Disney Corporation was founded by a man named Walt Disney. Now, the thing when it comes to Walt Disney is that, how do I put this? He was not a very nice man. Yeah, he had some problematic views and some opinions that really, question how we should be treating his media and his corporation. I mean, as an example, Walt Disney is, what was it again? Oh yeah, it was because of his anti-Semitism and his support for the Nazi. Well, I wouldn't say outright support. I would just say his lack of a strong anti-Nazi stance. But yeah, otherwise he was just politically he was apparently apolitical, but he would always have racial stereotypes in his films. He was a very racist man in general, and that fact is just kind of well known. But the fact that this is such public knowledge and people still watch anything made by Disney kind of turns me off Disney even more. So yeah, that's just kind of my relationship with the Disney Corporation, and just why I just don't really give a damn about Disney products or films and so on. I wasn't raised on Disney films. But saying that, I've always been made to watch Disney films anyway, and I've never really had a bad time watching them, especially the animated ones. The Little Mermaid, Mulan. Mulan's one of my favorites. Um, Moana. Sorry, Moana, and actually no, really that's kind of it. The rest have just been kind of forgettable to me, which is kind of sad. But moving on. But recently in my life, there's just been one movie I've been forced to witness, sadly, and that I've just come to really, truly hate with all of my heart, and that is the Mufasa, the Lion King prequel movie, which, to those who don't know, it's a prequel to the Lion King. Whoa! What an in-depth historical lesson I gave. But no, yeah, no, I hate this film with a burning passion because it's so bad as just a you know what? Completely independent of it being a prequel to anything. As a film alone, it's just really bad. It's terrible. It is not good in the slightest. And that made me think back on like the original Lion King film. And that made me question if The Lion King 1 was ever really good. And to be honest, looking back on it and thinking about its themes and messages, I'd have to say sadly no. The Lion King 1 is not actually a good movie. And I don't mean this as like, oh, everything's terrible. No, there are quite a lot of good bits when it comes to the Lion King 1, but my problem with it is that it holds a message that I think kind of proves a theory that I have when it comes to regarding the Disney Corporation's political agenda, and it's that um, Disney is a deeply conservative corporation, and I don't mean in the American sense. I mean in the reactionary monarchist sense. It's pro monarchy, it's pro social hierarchies, pro it's pro royalism essentially. Now, the line now to prove that, think back to any famous animated Disney film. You got The Little Mermaid, for instance, where what's her name again? The red-haired chick, the red-haired mermaid. She is a princess, and she wants to become human. And the main conflict of the film is that Ursula, the main villain, is trying to exploit the Little Mermaid's wishes to become a human, to exploit the political establishment of the Mermaid Kingdom. And it reaches to a point where Ursula is about to take over the kingdom for herself. But in the end, what's it called? Oh yeah, she's defeated. But the question is not really about whether or how to prevent this, how the system just kind of allowed Ursula to just achieve that sort of position in the first place, but more about how, what's it called? Oh yeah, more of just how Ursula was just a bad guy who was about to ruin the system, and so the Little Mermaid wins in the end. Or you know what? Here's a better example. Cinderella. Cinderella is not. I bring up Cinderella because it's not really an example of a film that I would say is directly politically advocating for monarchism, but more of just advocating for the social aspects, the cultural aspects of a monarchist system, that being Cinderella. Now, Cinderella, if I had to describe it, is a film where, you know, Cinderella is basically brought up poor and thinks that the only way she'll ever have any escape in life is if she's given the attention of a prince, of the prince of the kingdom. And the entire film is not really about Cinderella realizing that no, that's not what she needs. Instead, she needs to stand up for herself and leave the situation that she's in. Instead, the film is about how Cinderella should doll up and become a perfect bride to a prince of a tiny kingdom. And, you know, in the end, the moral of the story is that you don't need a man to complete you. It's a film about how once you find the right husband, your life will be perfect. Which, ironically is enough, is a theme that Roald Dahl actually counteracted, because in his version of Cinderella, he rightly pointed out that the prince is an insane man who runs a kingdom. Her Cinderella's family is awful, and instead of Cinderella feeling like she has to choose between herself and this prince, instead the magic the fairy godmother instead transports Cinderella away from that terrible situation and allows her to, you know, live a simple and happy life where she marries a jam maker and they live a happy life. Which I think is, ironically enough, is, I think, actually one of Roald Dahl's more progressive works in a really simplistic sense of that. Or, you know, here, let me pull up another example, because there's just too many films. Disney animated movies. Yep. Okay. Here, let me get them. God damn, there's just so many of these sort of films. Okay. Another one that I think uh deserves mentioning is perhaps the film um Aladdin. Now, Aladdin is a unique case where, you know, actually no, it's not unique. It still enforces my argument where Aladdin is this poor nobody in the middle of the kingdom. Sorry, I'm just looking it up. Yeah, okay. So it's just set in a kingdom, and Aladdin wants to, you know, rise up in the social ladder and to marry the princess of the kingdom. And the way he does that is by pure luck of finding a magic genie who will help him with all of his dreams. And, you know, in in the contemporary sense of, you know, our times, the way we would see such a story going is that Aladdin would like walk away from having such aspirations to join what is essentially a culturally and politically toxic system to try and find his own happiness and, you know, have a life that will actually make him feel fulfilled in life. But no, instead in this film, the the monarchy is good, and the only problem is the main villain, who's this guy named who's it? I'm trying to find these names. Um, hmm. Yeah, Lago is. Iago? Yeah, Iago, who's basically the prime minister of the kingdom, who's basically trying to influence the sultan, or the king, of the kingdom that Aladdin is in to, do whatever he wants. Now, the thing about this film is that it's not really a critique of just how Aladdin should try to not go for the system because it's just so corrupt and toxic. Instead, it's a film about how we just need to stop the bad guys, and if Aladdin does that, then he'll get the woman of his dreams, the lifestyle he wants, and all of that. Now, before you say anything, I know what I'm doing. I'm being too harsh on essentially what are kids' films, and that these films are just pure escapism and they're meant to tell simple stories for children. And that's a perfectly valid and fine argument. I'm not going to be overly political when it comes to this, but you know, the thing I believe is that films are, and not films, stories in general, they're not just meant to send moral messages, but but oddly enough, they're oddly political in what they say and I don't mean political in the sense of like, oh, this book supports gay rights or whatever. No, I mean political in the sense of like challenging preconceived notions of traditions, of societal standards or tropes or so on. Inherently political works that make us question ourselves as a society and so on. But all these films instead, most Disney films, particularly from the Renaissance era of like when you have the animated films like, The Little Mermaid, The Lion King, and so on. What's unique about them is that they have a uniquely monarchist view of just how their political statements are. And I think The Lion King is actually a really good symbol of just how monarchist this film is, particularly the prequel Mufasa. But before we look into Mufasa, I think it's important we take a look at The Lion King itself and why earlier I said that I don't think it actually ever was a good film, like a particularly useful film. Now, the thing with The Lion King, the 1994 animated version, not the remastered real life thing that we got. The thing with the 1994 um film is that it is honestly a pretty good film all in all, and it's interesting. It has a good message of just like the hero losing his parents. He grows up to find the will within himself to fight against the evil King Scar, and when he's old enough, he defeats the king. He defeats the evil usurper, and saves the day. He saves the Pride of Lands. What is this? What is it called again? Yeah, the Pride Lands, which is basically the kingdom's name. But otherwise, it's a pretty simple story, and any other day I would enjoy it. But this is me. I'm an inherently overly nitpicky and overly politicized, overly invested person. I made a Fallout 4 video where I literally explained to you all my autism and how it makes me think too much about things that nobody else thinks about. But in the Lion King's case, ooh, sorry. In the Lion King's case, it's not it's not politically relevant or needed because the main what we would think about nowadays in the context of a film about monarchies and kingdoms is that most contemporary films nowadays would instead say that these sorts of systems create these outcomes of tyrannical rulers later on, and that these systems are inherently archaic and are inherently prone to tyranny and evil and authoritarianism. Which that's what everybody mostly in the world agrees, at least in the West. I think in other places like Asia, Africa, South America, and so on, that I think actually no, even more so in those regions and countries, there's actually an even stronger anti monarchist message because of the experiences of those countries. Um, South America, for instance, there was a huge history of independence and fighting against Spanish royal rule, and then the overthrow and establishment of republics that, however corrupt, were designed to fight against the tyranny of monarchies again. The United States was founded as an inherently anti monarchist experiment. The French Revolution overthrew its king because of the inherent corruption and the devastation wrought upon the French kingdom. The Germany itself, it overthrew the Kaiser because it just brought them nothing more than misery. And within Asia itself, China overthrew the emperor because it was incredibly corrupt and incompetent. And Africa itself, Europeans pretty much destroyed all of the old monarchies and rulers of African descent, and instead brought their own European imperial tendencies and monarchies and so on, fostering a strong republican sentiment in Africa. But the interesting thing is that in the West, there's sort of a nostalgia, or at least a sort of fetishization of the monarchist system. Even in like a democracy like Britain, monarchism is incredibly strong here, even if it has been declining over the past few years, because that's just how it's always been. There's no challenges to the monarchy as of this video. But yeah, and the reason why I bring that up is that, it's to basically let you all know that films that inherently push for the goodness of monarchist values or royalism are just not relevant at all nowadays. But The Lion King was able to subvert that sort of, cultural context because of its incredibly simplistic storytelling, as well as it being a pretty good, like having a pretty good simple story to tell, which allowed the film to subvert that and later on become as popular as it is. Now, the thing with The Lion King, however, is that it's inherently pro-monarchist, and I mean that quite literally, because the main message of the film isn't that the system that the Pride Lands established was prone to a lion like Scar from taking over and conquering it all. No, the message of the film was like, oh, Scar was not the right king, so in actuality, what's his name again? Simba. Simba, once he returns to the throne, everything will be bright and perfect. Which, no, that's not how it works. That's not how it works. But okay, I think a pretty good defense that anybody else will have when they hear me say this is that, well, these are not humans. These are animals. These are lions. Which, yeah, that's true. In fact, I agree with you. But I think what would overrule that argument is the fact that the animals act in social and engage in social and political conduct similar to humans. They have like King Mufasa has an advisor in the form of Rafiki. They have a feudal structure. They have public gatherings. They have a remarkably human social structures, particularly monarchist ones that allow for King Mufasa to express his pride, his power, and his inherent superiority over, the rest of the animals. And I think Rafiki is actually particularly unique because I think he's presented as an advisor and a shaman, but I think it would also be not too far out there to present him as a sort of prime ministerial figure in this system that is the Pride Lands. And it's just, how would I put this? it's incredibly human in how it operates. I mean, sure, you could say, oh, but, they're all animals, so they're acting as animals. They have the animal instincts. And that's slightly true, but they still act as humans, particularly in Scar. Now, Scar, he's unique because he's a representation of just like the ills of monarchism and hereditary structures in general, because he is a man that just wants power for its own sake. Which, ugh, God. He basically, what Scar wants is to kill Mufasa and Simba, basically assassinate them, and then, take over the Pride Lands and become the illegal king. Or at least he would be seen as the legitimate king because he's next in line, logically, if Mufasa and his line were dead. But here's the thing. The way Scar commences his assassination has an incredibly human logic to it. Because his first instinct, and what any animal would probably do, is kill. would be to kill Mufasa in an open fight where everyone can see it, where Scar could establish his dominance. But no, the way Scar does it is incredibly human. Firstly, he establishes an alliance with the hyenas, or is it the hyenas? Let me check. Yeah, the hyenas. Scar gets the hyenas to join his side to become his royal enforcers, to become his allies. That's an incredibly human thing to do. Get some allies to achieve some power. And then later on, he doesn't simply kill Mufasa by murdering him. No, he stages it. He uses a stampede to cover up his murder. And then he uses his guards to attempt to kill Simba, and he essentially runs about the kingdom. And that is just an incredibly human logic. So I think that pretty much destroys the argument of this, like, oh, this is just the animal kingdom, this is how things work. No, that I don't think that applies here, because the way the film works is incredibly human. And then there's Simba. He comes back because he gets his own alliance of like loyalists and followers who follow him back to the kingdom, and they fight in a small civil war where Simba defeats Scar. He pushes out the hyenas in what can be considered a ethnic cleansing, and he reasserts his dominance. He wins a civil war, essentially. That is also incredibly human. And it's just so, in all honesty, The Lion King is an argument for monarchism, because the animal kingdom argument does not work here. They're all humans, just with furry personas. And, so yeah, this film is a piece of monarchist propaganda. It's not saying that the system was always corrupt and that Simba needs to get rid of the system and replace it with something else to prevent the abuses of Scar again. Because Scar was an incredibly corrupt ruler. The land died underneath him. He pretty much enslaved all of the female lions and cubs. So it's like, it's a pro-monarchist film. But it's not saying that all monarchs are good. It's only saying that the right monarch is good. Which, that is kind of unsettling to me, because that is not the message that contemporary films nowadays, or at least non-Disney films, would be saying. They'd be saying, hey, this system sucks, let's change it, and the main character would do that. But this film instead says, no, the system is good, it just doesn't have the right person in charge. Which slightly unsettles me in a way. Now that I have established basically that The Lion King is a piece of pro-reactionary propaganda, essentially, let's talk about Mufasa. Now, before I get into like the political messaging and just how inherently conservative it is, and how it proposes the great man theory, as a film alone, it's not good. It's just not a good movie. okay, let's talk about just like the animation style and all that. I I honestly don't like it. Sorry, I'm trying to pull up the Wikipedia page so I can organize my thoughts, but to be all honesty, I don't like the animation style and I don't like the 3D sort of obsession that Disney. Who made it? Yeah, it's a Disney film. I just don't like it because it's just so. It's way. It removes all of the fun of just like an original Lion King film. Because for all my problems that I have with the Lion King, I enjoy the animation style. I love animation in general, as I've already said in my Arcane video. But yeah, I don't like the Mufasa the Lion King's obsession with 3D animation. It's just it removes all of the fun. It's just not good. But anyway, and then there's just all of this singing and the dialogue and the story. Okay, starting with the dialogue, I don't like the dialogue. It's way too on the nose, and it's just like they say so much without actually saying anything. And not only that, but how do I put this? They they keep bringing they never say anything that like would emotionally, hit me because for as much as I don't like Mufasa, as long as it had dialogue and writing that really kind of hit me here, is this where my heart is? I don't know. If it really hit me in the emotional gut, I would have been a lot more forgiving. But no, it's just so bland. It's just like it just does it feels like it's trying to tick down a bunch of a bullet a bullet list. It's trying to tick away at like objectives. Like, okay, make Mufasa doubt himself in this scene, then make him save what's her name again? His wife later on. Um, yeah, Sarabi. Make him save Sarabi later on. Make him have an argument with what's his name? Taka, and you know it just doesn't really do anything for me, in all honesty. And the singing, oh god, the singing is horrific. Okay, you know what? That's not fair. I'm not gonna say the singing is horrific because of the voice actors. That is not the intention of what I'm saying in my criticism. I don't think the voice actors have anything to do with the quality of a film. I think that the songs they were made to sing, though, were just completely unnecessary. And they're. Actually, you know what? It's okay to have songs in a film. But the songs in this film were terrible. They were just so bad. Like, the brother one at the beginning of the film where Mufasa meets Taka for the first time. And then there's, you know, the the love song between Sarabi and uh Mufasa. I really can't forget these names. I don't script any of this. I'm just telling you guys what I think. But anyway, um, and then what else? There was another song. Oh yeah, there was a song about the white lions. Um, yeah, King Kiros, where he begins singing about how dangerous and deadly he is. Um, and then what else? Oh yeah, and then there is the song about Malele by, I think, Rafiki, and um, yeah, there's just a lot of songs, and the thing is that they're not good. They're not good songs. I'm fine with. I've been growing more and more okay with musicals because the thing is that my autism makes me cringe so much. So when I hear a musical in a film, I'm like, oh no. But I've been growing to be better with that, and I actually do enjoy some musical films as long as like K-pop Demon Hunters. I love that movie. I love the songs because they're good songs. But in Mufasa the Lion King, The songs are so bad that I sit there in the movie theater with my ears closed, and it's not a good viewing experience. And then of course there's the story. You know what? I'm gonna talk about the story with you guys, and then I'll talk more about like my analysis later on. But I just need to talk to you guys just about how each beat of this film fails as a film, or just like what I personally don't like about it, and just how it's not good. But um, anyway, okay, so let's get into Mufasa, the Lion King. So we begin the film with a sort of present day thing where we look back at Simba, who's now grown up with his wife, Nala, and they both have a daughter named Kiara. Kiara? Yeah. And then because um, contraception does not exist for the animal kingdom, Nala and Simba are having another child. What the child's name is, I have no idea. But yeah, they're having another child. So they leave Kiara behind at the Pride lands, just for the time being, while they're having the pregnancy. But who comes to watch them is actually Simba's old friends, Timon and Pumbaa. I hate them both. They are the most boring. No, no, actually, no, they're not boring. They're annoying because all they do for the film is provide something called color commentary. Now, to those who don't know what color commentary is, I had to look this up myself, but essentially what it is basically a sort of commentary used by sports people, basically the play commentators who basically describe everything that's going on in real time. So when you listen to like a football game and they're basically just narrating everything that's going on, that's what color commentary is. Now, Timon and Pumbaa's color commentary is really just used for cheap laughs and just annoying jokes that are not funny, and they're just not really needed in this film, and I really wish they weren't. Instead, the real person who actually watches over and tells the story to Kiara is Rafiki. And Rafiki in this film, I'll get into him a little bit later because he's going to be important later on in the plot. But Rafiki then begins telling the tale of um, Mufasa to, the little girl. And as much as I cringed at the beginning, otherwise it's not a bad introduction. It's just like, okay, we're going to be listening to a story being told. And I don't mind that sometimes. That's fine. That's not a bad idea. But then we enter the actual beginning of the film, where we meet baby Mufasa and his mother and father. What is Masego and Afia. Wait. I am really trying to figure out who the parents are. Okay. Masago. Okay. Wait. Afia? Okay. Afia is the wife. Masago is the husband. He's the father. So, together, they're taking him through the lands of, like, the Namid... The Namid Desert? Oh, it's in... Oh, okay, so basically, he originally came from a region in Namibia called the Namib Desert. Just named after the country, Namibia. But anyway, so, Mufasa originally came from Namibia, and, he was living out there with his parents. Around the time there was a massive drought that caused mass starvation and dehydration amongst the animal population. And then they begin singing this song, and it's not a good song, about this mythical land called Malele. And, it's a bad song. I hate it. And it establishes Malele as a sort of plot MacGuffin, which is which I'm going to spoil it now, is the Pride Lands later on in the future. Malele is basically this utopian heaven for animals, and yeah, it's not important for much of the story. Just like this entire film was. It's not important, nobody asked for it, nobody really needed a backstory on Mufasa. But anyway, so during that song, a flash flood occurs. It presumably kills Mufasa's parents before he's swept away to the. Wait, what? He swept all the way up into Botswana? How? How did he survive that flood? He went all the way. Okay, he started in the Namibian coast. Very far away, very dry, very deserted. But then somehow a flood takes him all the way to northern Botswana. This children's film does not seem very realistic. But anyway, moving on from that bit of knowledge that will curse me forever. He arrives in Botswana and, he's about to get eaten by some crocodiles, but he's saved by a little lion cub named Taka and his mother, Queen Eshe. But before he can even come with them, he's challenged by the local lion king, Obasi, who challenges Mufasa to a race between him and his son Taka to see if he's allowed to stay. And Taka deliberately loses. That way Mufasa can stay, which is an incredibly kind and selfless act by Taka, because in the song that will come up in that little sequence, he will sing about wanting to have a brother. It was genuinely one of the worst songs I've ever heard. The auto-tuning was bad, the lyrics were horrifically boring, and the song itself was just brother, brother, brother. It just kept repeating the word brother in the most homoerotic fashion I've ever heard. And oh my god, it was bad. It was bad. It was so bad. But anyway, this is where I actually come into my first major problem with the film, which is that Mufasa never actually really forms a connection with King Obasi, Queen Eshe, and Taka. And I mean it like, Mufasa, at this point, what we assume is that his parents are dead. We don't know if they're alive. And he's been thrown out hundreds of miles deep into the African continent, all the way to northern Botswana. At this point, he has no one left. So the natural assumption would be that, he grows up over time to accept Eshe and Obase as his parents. Eshe is happy to, care for him because that's her motherly instincts. And Obase, he's a little bit difficult, but he would eventually grow on to accept Mufasa as a worthy son, as a worthy lion. And this is the point where I think the film really drops the first ball, and it's that the relationship between these people is just never explored. Genuinely, it's just not important. It doesn't do anything. Because, Eshe could, become, Mufasa's new mother, instead of just being the caretaker who just watches over him and trains him. And Obase could have been a really good character of just how he instills good values within Mufasa. They could have had a real found family thing, but they just don't do that. And later on, we then meet the main villains of this film called. Who are they? It's literally just a lion tribe called the Outsiders, led by this white lion called King Kiros. Now, basically, he's a white supremacist in lion form. Oh no, the furry Nazi persona thing is a real thing. But, yeah. He's basically a white lion supremacist. He wants to murder all lions in existence. And, yeah, that's pretty much his entire character. Ironically enough, I actually kind of like King Kiros because he actually acts like a lion. His main goal is destruction and domination over what I can only assume is all of Africa with his power, which that's a fine enough character motivation for a villain. I actually think he's not too bad. I just hate his singing. He does a lot of singing, and it sucks. But anyway, so yeah, so yeah, basically the White Lions come along to the tribe led by King Obase, and at that point, King Obase orders Mufasa to protect Taka, and Taka and Mufasa both leave the tribe, and then, not even 5 minutes later, the entire tribe that looked over Mufasa for all of his life is massacred. The film is not ambiguous about that. They're all massacred. So all those characters did not mean anything. Except Taka. But, you know what? Actually, you know what? Let me just speed run through the rest. Later on, Taka and Mufasa meet Sarabi. And Taka loves Sarabi. And he tries to get with her. But Sarabi just acts like completely indifferent to him. Except she gets her tail tingling when she sees Mufasa, and the way they develop their love is the most chosen one way I've ever seen. It's literally like it's literally like, you know, she literally tells him that he's the chosen one and that she loves him forever and ever, even though Mufasa, following the bro code, that he literally tries to say, hey, no, my brother Taka loves you, he wants you, but Sarabi just doesn't give a damn. Which, I mean, hey, at least Mufasa tried to hold up the bro code for a little bit anyway. But then he eventually succumbs to Sarabi, and they fall in love together. And Taka grows incredibly jealous because of this, and later on develops an alliance with King Kiros and the White Lions. And during their journey, they meet Rafiki. Is it Rafiki? Yeah, Rafiki. I'm so sorry about this. I'm not the best at this, but yeah, they meet Rafiki, and he leads them to the lands of Malele. And they do reach Malele, which actually turns out to be the Pride lands in The Lion King, the 1994 version. But in this film, it's called Malele. They eventually reach Malele, and when they do, the film just fully loses his mind and goes in the stupidest direction I've ever seen. So the White Lions show up not too long after them, and they basically try to massacre Mufasa, Taka, and the others. And so Mufasa, with the help of the other animals of the Pride Lands, literally leads a local rebellion against the White Lions, which I kind of loved because it was just like, I don't know if it was intentional, but I like to think of it as like a little metaphor for, like, you know, the African people rebelling against, you know, white imperialists, which, you know, I kind of like that. But anyway, so King Kiros corners Mufasa, tries to kill him, but Taka, having a changed heart, saves Mufasa's life by trying to drown King Kiros underneath a rock in a pool, and Mufasa escapes, luckily for him. But then the film just goes in the weirdest direction by having a coincidental earthquake happen, and then a local mountain literally just becomes Pride Rock. It is the most coincidence I've ever seen. That was just the stupidest reason for why Pride Rock exists. It explains why it exists later on in The Lion King. And okay, so now this is the bit of the film where it really gets at me, and this is where I'm going to stop basically summarizing the plot for you. The reason why the plot summarization was so quick is because, genuinely, nothing happens in this movie. How long is it again? It's like, yeah, it's nearly 2 hours of nothing. Nothing happens in this movie. There's no story other than it being literally the most ham-fisted way of just, like, explaining the prologue to the original Lion King. It gives Mufasa no challenges. He's given everything on his lap. He gets a kingdom, he gets a wife, And that's it. Now, I'm going to go over several problematic things that I have with this film. And the first thing I'm going to talk about is the relationship that Taka has with Mufasa in this film. Now, here's the thing about Taka. When we first meet him in the film, he's an incredibly selfless and kind kid, except he's scared, you know? He's not as brave as Mufasa, and that's not a bad thing on its own, you know? But the way he's portrayed as just this cowardly little. Would it count here? He's portrayed as a pussy, essentially, which that's not crass because cats are lions are cats. I think. I don't know. I'm not a zoologist, but anyway, basically, Taka is not as brave as Mufasa. He's very scared, which is an incredibly natural thing for him to be because he's being chased by white supremacist lions essentially. And that would be terrifying to anybody. Except he's portrayed as nothing more than a villainous coward who deserved nothing but pain. And here's the thing about Taka. He actually tries to succeed in what he's trying to do. Which one of them being his attempts at, trying to get along with Sarabi. He tries to get with Sarabi. He tries to, talk to her, make conversation. And Sarabi, she's just mean. She reminds me of the high school girls I used to try and ask out or at least talk to, and whom were just never gave me like any sort of chill. Don't worry, I don't hold any resentment at all. I do, but anyway, moving past my traumas. Taka is a character who legitimately tries to, achieve things, even if it's kind of a lackluster attempt. But he tries. He does try. And, he any other film who saw Taka would still kind of betray Mufasa, but in the end, he would learn his mistakes and he would do everything he can to redeem himself. And Taka doesn't. Instead, Taka does save Mufasa's life by blocking King Kiros just in time and gets permanently scarred for it. And then afterwards, Mufasa, having literally just been saved by Taka, is like, you're nothing to me now. I'm not even going to speak your name. You know what? I'm going to give you a new name, Scar. Actually, no. That's not fair. Taka gives himself the title of Scar, which, yeah, that's kind of a banger name, but still, it's a deliberate act of dehumanization, or de-lionization, I would say, that, it's just really, it's like, what kind of message is that positing? Taka didn't even commit anything inherently awful. He just tried to sabotage Mufasa, and not even in a really serious way. He just helped the white lions follow them. And the problem I have with Taka is that, he, instead of portraying him as a character who just needs to be rehabilitated, or perhaps he needs to work towards redemption, he's instead completely stripped of his name. He's not given any sort of sympathy or even any hints of a possible redemption, or hey, you may have betrayed us now, but if you continue to show that you're loyal, if you're going to be loyal to us, then you need to work for that, which is incredibly fair. But instead, this film says that, hey, if anybody ever betrays you, literally stop calling them by their name. Make them feel dehumanized. Make them feel like they're beneath you. Make them feel like they're an Untermensch? The German term for subhuman. Make them feel like a subhuman to you. Which, I mean, if Taka did something more heinous, then yeah, I would agree, Well, no, I wouldn't agree. I would simply agree with the sentiment that you don't need to be kind to people who did something horrific towards you. But the thing with Taka is that he's not an inherently evil person. He was a scared, confused, easily manipulated person. And he tried to save Mufasa. He clearly regretted what he did. And instead, he's just completely stripped of his right to having his own name, which that is not a good message to give to anybody. You know, that people who cross you, even if it wasn't something that kills you, or even if it hurts you. No, no. Let me put it this way. What the film is saying indirectly is that if you ever cross somebody that is inherently more powerful than you, if you cross them, and even if you regret it later on, then you're completely beyond helping, and that you should suffer for what you did, which is not a good message for a kid's film to have, essentially. That's what I'm saying. That what Taka's transformation to Scar says, that dehumanization is okay as long as you're the good guy, which is an incredibly bad message to have, and it's just one that I find very problematic. Anyway, let's get on to the second point, which is Mufasa just suddenly being turned into the king. Now, okay, here's the thing. Mufasa did save the people of the Pride Lands by helping them rise up against, you know, King Kiros and the white supremacist lions. That's an incredibly noble thing to do. That is brave. But the thing is that instead of the animals being grateful for him and seeing him as a hero and being like, hey, you helped us out a lot. You're one of us now. You can stay with us. No, instead they literally bow down to him as if he's God. As if he's the lion god himself. And, it's like, Jesus Christ, he just appeared 5 minutes ago. What if he could be a terrible person, but you're just going to make him your king right away? And in the film, Mufasa even's like, no, 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 please, no, I do not want to be your king. Do not bow your heads, stand up, please, we are all equals. But no, instead the film says, no, 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 you're the king now. You're the bestest, brightest, most special little boy to us. You're our king now, even though we just met you today. And it's like, but here's the thing. Before Mufasa came along, the Pride Lands were fine on their own. They didn't have a king. They didn't have any rulers. They didn't even have any lions, as far as I'm aware. It was an incredibly harmonious and peaceful and equal society. It was a land where no men were kings. But the film insists that because Mufasa did one good thing, he deserves the divine right to rule. He is completely owed that. These animals are no longer beings worthy of being seen as equals, and instead of being treated like, hey, you saved us, you're one of us now, he's instead treated as, oh my god, you saved us, you must be God. Here, become our God King, please. Which is like, what? And the fact that Mufasa even tries to refuse it, and he's still forced into becoming the king in the end, and then he uses it to dehumanize Taka, it's like, oh my god. What is this film? It is ironically a pro-monarchy film. It's a film that's pro-benevolent autocracy. It's incredibly weird to see. Especially from like a Disney film, a company that apparently wants to be seen as more progressive and modern and woke, which I'm going to describe to you later on why that's complete BS. But anyway, so yeah, this is a film that unironically states that monarchy is the best, as long as you have the right ruler at the right time, even if Scar later on goes on to take over the kingdom in a coup. Now, okay. This film has a the message is just politically toxic as a political message. It's like, if anybody ever does anything good for you ever, then you are beneath them, and that you should be licking their boots for them even doing something nice for you, which is an insane message to have in a kids film. That as long as anyone does anything nice for you or anything remotely good, then they are owed absolute power over you, which is a horrific message to have in a film like that. Which leads to my final thing. This film pushes the great man theory. I mean that genuinely. This, to those who don't know, the great man theory is basically a theory made by, let me check. Great man theory. It's a, yeah, okay. It's a 19th century idea that was made up by Thomas Carlyle, and that it proposes that history is driven by a few special individuals, otherwise known as great men, who go on to reshape what it means to be human, what it means to be a society, what it means to be a ruler. And it's an incredibly debated topic amongst philosophical and historical circles, and it's widely seen as a very flawed view of how to view world history, because to anyone who actually reads a textbook, sure, we have great leaders in them, but they didn't change society alone. They had followers. They had, people who allied with them. Their change came from collective movements, not individuals alone. And this film pushes the idea that all these animals who rose up alongside Mufasa to protect their homeland from what are white imperialist lions, no. They didn't do any of the work. It was Mufasa alone. He drove the battle. He saved us all. Therefore, he gets to be the king. He's a great lion, or a great man. Which, I don't like that. This film bothered me when I first left the theater, because it was just an inherently pro-monarchism, pro-autocracy, pro-great man theory, or benevolent autocracy film. It is a pro-authoritarian film. It says that, no, the people and societies, even if they're absolutely fine and do not need great leaders like Mufasa, they are still in need of kings, of kingdoms, of royals, of monarchies. No. None of this liberal stuff. None of this society where, everyone is equal. No man a king. No, instead it's, you need a king. Simple as that. And I know I'm just sounding like a nitpicky child, but this is a inherently reactionary film, particularly of a variety of what I would call oddly European. It's a deeply European ideal, long held by various European movements. You have some niche French monarchist. Britain is essentially the last home beacon of a somewhat influential monarch. You have some movements in Germany who want a Kaiserreich again. You have Poland, where there's a entire political party that advocates for monarchism, or at least Catholic monarchism. It's a weird political party. I'll talk about it one day. And otherwise, yeah, it's just an inherently reactionary European ideal. And I think what a political analysis would think is that this film is believing it's asserting the idea of constitutional monarchism. No, it's advocating for autocracy. And I think that is a politically bad message to give to kids. And it doesn't say that, hey, all these people worked together to defeat a big bad. No one was above the rest. They all worked together. They were equal. It instead says that no, the animals' collective efforts meant nothing. Instead, it was Mufasa alone who saved the day. Which, yeah, I hate this film, and it's just because of bad writing, a bad story, bad songs, and a bad message. And I think this film kind of adds to my point that the Disney Corporation, people call Disney going woke, or they think that it's progressive or something, and that's pushing phony liberal white American ideals of like what it means to be left wing. No, it's not. In fact, I'd argue that the Disney Corporation never is intending to do that. In all of its major films, the good guys were always royals, they were always elites, they were always people with immense amounts of power already, and that the only reason why things go bad in those films is because the system is not the bad guy. It was just this bad guy who was the disease and definitely not a symptom. And I don't know, that just makes me really uncomfortable because it's like, the I may not be a Disney kid. I do not know anybody else who is a Disney kid. But the Disney Corporation still has a massive global outreach on tons of children. And I don't think it's safe to have a corporation that constantly advocates for the glamour and the ideals and the benefits of having monarchism or benevolent autocracy. That's not good. I don't think that's a good film. And I don't think that's a good corporation to have around. Um, and look, I know I sound like a conspiracy theorist, or at the very worst, I sound like I'm someone who's just looking way too deep into this, and is just trying to like take away the fun from, a kids movie. And yeah, you're largely right. I would look like someone like that, and I do think I do look like that. And, you know, if you enjoyed the film, that's fine. I think. Actually, no. Yeah, no. If you enjoyed the film, okay, good on you. That's fine. And if you still enjoy Disney films, yeah, that's fine too. I don't think Disney films are just this massive propaganda campaign, unless they were made in the Disney era, because those were all clearly made to push racist messages. But anyway, no, basically, Disney films, I don't think they're inherently propagandistic. But the reason why I'm quite harsh to them is pretty simple. They're kids' films. And children, when they grow up, they always latch on to media that they grew up with as a source of, inspiration, as a source of moral messaging, of like guiding their of like slightly informing their moral guidelines. People even use it as like ways to talk about politics and so on, even though that's a stupid way of looking at things. Overall, it's like, movies are still very important to the development of each and every one of us. And I think it would be stupid to deny that fictional worlds influence the real one. And, I guess if I had to say a moral to the story, it would be that just be careful what kind of messaging or like what kind of messages or themes you're trying to put out at the end of your work and so on. Because, you could write a fantastic story that talks about the flaws of systems and how characters and people who want to make sure that it never happens again are the ones who are stories that are actually really good. Or you can have a film like Mufasa, which unironically says that monarchism is great, the system is not bad, it's just the bad apples in it. And if you go the latter route, I'm sorry. You're probably going to be a billionaire by now, let's be honest. Because Disney adults, the greatest piggy bank known to mankind. Anyway, yeah. So, yeah, that's the end of my little discussion. I think I'm just going to ramble a little bit on here about just talking to you guys. And I just wanted to say this. Thank you again for all the support I've been given. And I hope we could reach 200 subscribers by the time I posted this. And I really want you guys to enjoy my content and, just sort of put it on in the background, do whatever you're doing, but still enjoy listening to my stuff or my beautiful, sexy voice. I'm joking, but yeah, seriously, I really do hope you guys enjoy my content. And, if you guys really do want to post ideas and stuff, you could easily just post them down below. I'm not gonna not listen to them. I'll happily, just give me an idea for a video that sounds intriguing enough and I'll do it. You know, I'm like, um, I'm like a chat GPT bot, except I'm human and I have, um, I don't know what to say. Anyway, um, yeah. Again, thank you guys a lot for watching. Have a lovely day, and don't watch any more Disney films, please. It's all shit.